Welcome to another edition of All Octaves with me, Val Kleinhans, where we BS about music because we like it. We talk with the musicians that play it. We talk with the fans that enjoy it. Today, speaking with a musician, Mike from 13 Arrows is in the building, one of Minnesota's own. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us and creating this platform for artists and sharing with the world. I'm really excited to chat and get into it.
Hell yeah, we want to get to know you. So tell me about the beginning of 13 Arrows.
Yeah, so 13 Arrows, to go way back, um, we're all guys who pretty much grew up in Bloomington, or at least lived there at one point. And so
Okay.
the four of us, like the first time I met our bass player Harry, I think we were in eighth grade. And then our drummer and guitar player, Johnny and Eddie, they're brothers. And growing up, it was kind of funny because we were all in like different bands around that community.
Okay.
And we would like play against each other in battle of the bands and things like that. And it was kind of a funny dynamic. And then much later in life, after people had, moved away and gone to school and then came back to Minnesota and things like that, we all started kind of cross pollinating in different bands again. And so Eddie and I were in a band together prior to 13 Arrows and started up the idea of doing something new after that. So him and I came together and then brought in Johnny, his brother, the drummer, and then Harry came in as well. And so it was kind of a big full circle moment. But that was about, I think, like 7 or 8 years ago now when we first started doing 13 Arrows. And that was the first time all four of us had been in a band together.
Sweet. So just to paint the picture for anybody outside of Minnesota listening, this is like
Yeah.
kids rocking out in the suburbs near Mall of
Yep.
America, just having a
Yes.
good time.
Totally. That's the picture right there. That's it.
And for anybody that doesn't know you, can you describe your sound?
Yeah, our sound, I think it's always an interesting exercise talking about that because I think we have in our mind what our inspirations are and what we aspire to
Mm,
sound like and think we sound like. And I would describe that as just old school rock and roll, like 70s era, kind of lots of song. Like Tom Petty is a good inspiration that we describe just because it's very song based, but it's just
mhm.
dudes in a band with instruments making music and rocking out. But very like songwriting based and it's melodic. But it's interesting when we meet new people or someone comes out to a gig who's never seen us before and they tell us what they think. You'll hear stuff that's totally different than that. People think that's what we sound like, and it's always really fun to hear different perspectives on that. So I would just say rock and roll though.
Facts. So was that always the intention when you created 13 Arrows? Did you always want to be a rock band?
Yeah, it has evolved a little bit. I think when we first started, it was I play guitar. Eddie is lead guitar player, so I learned a lot from him. But we're both very guitar guys, so it was like, okay, this is gonna be like guitars and riffs and like in your
Hmm.
face, super high energy, like Angus Young, like AC/DC. Let's just have fun. And I think as time has gone on, we still have kind of that spirit, but I think it's become even more song based versus guitar based. And that's been the evolution a bit. So I don't think we've totally changed who we are, but it's definitely evolved to become something a little bit different than the original thought, I think.
Yeah, and you rep Minnesota proudly. I've seen, I know you do local
Mhm.
shows quite often. Why is it important to you to do just to show love to your state and represent where you're from?
Yeah, well, I mean, we all grew up here and have lived here for a long period of time. And I think that especially in the creative world in general, like whether it's music or film or art, a lot of people growing up in a place where we did are like, I got to get out of here and go to New York or LA or Nashville or Austin or somewhere that's like famously regarded as the hub for that. Like, you want to
Hmm.
be a video editor, you're probably going to do well in LA. That's where all that stuff is. If you want to make albums, you're probably going to do well in Nashville. But I think for myself personally and the rest of the band, I think would feel the same is that my whole life it's always been more important about who I'm with rather than where I'm
Hmm.
going. And we found the people we want to be with and we're making it how we want to and in our own space. And I don't feel like we've had that feeling that we have to be somewhere else to do what we want to do.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said some of you guys actually came back after being away.
Yeah, so I know like Eddie lived in Boston for a bit. I lived in Colorado for a bit. Harry's been all over the place, like Canada, Texas, East Coast. Um, but I think just life circumstances for some reason drew us all back to home, being close to
Oh.
family, things like that. So, leaving for a school or a job opportunity or something, but then we all somehow ended up finding our way back here for one reason or another.
So it was kind of a weird coincidence that you guys just found each other again.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. It's kind of just serendipitous.
Nice. And I know, so I'm in Rochester and I've been in Rochester for the past 6 years. We're still buzzing after Big Turn, which was not too long ago, which
Yeah.
is, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a huge festival where a lot of bands from Minnesota and really all over the Midwest play. A lot of acts from our area played it. How do you like Big Turn? I know you played this year. Have you played before?
This was our first year, and so we were really, really excited about the opportunity, and I think just grateful to kind of get our foot in the door and hopefully keep doing it every year afterwards. We had a great time, and it was I mean, there's not a lot of other bands that we've met locally that seem to have a similar sound, or like I don't there is definitely a strong music community, but I don't know if I really feel like we have like a scene that a lot of places or a lot of genres have. And so going to something like Big Turn was super cool to just really feel that come to life, like all these other artists and all these other bands and interacting and meeting people who are listeners and creators, and just kind of having it all culminate into this mecca of so many different types of artists and people coming together, and it still being very Minnesota based, and it was
Mhm.
a really cool experience.
Everybody's there. Everybody's ready to party. Nobody
Yeah.
minds the cold because we're all used to it and we don't care.
Yep.
We're doing a music festival in February. We'll do
Yeah.
it.
Exactly. Yep. It was kind of funny too when we first got into town, and it's the middle of the day and you're just like kind of checking in and waiting for your venue to set up and load in, and you can just see these groups of like four or five like really cool dressed people walking around, and it's like that's a band. That's a band.
That's
That's got to be a
it.
band too. Yeah.
Just you can tell by the swag. That's
Yeah, you
it.
can just tell by the way they interact and the way they're dressing or the way that their just kind of vibe is. It's like kind of funny to just spectate that, people watch in a sense.
Is it harder to do that in Minneapolis? Because I feel like a lot of people are pretty good dressers there too.
Yeah, there's definitely people who are much better dressers than we are, who are not doing art or music or trying to look cool like we're trying to look cool.
Oh,
They're just being cool.
what do you think is going on in the Minneapolis scene today? You mentioned that maybe there's not a whole lot of rock going on, but what is going on? What is happening today, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a really good evolution, and I think that a lot of artists in the past that maybe were flying under the radar are not getting the attention that they should have been. I think hopefully now are starting to.
Hmm.
I think just more diversity, different types of music, different walks of life who are the creators behind the music. And I mean, I'll just be straight up. I mean, we're four middle class, straight white dudes making rock and roll like people did same back in the day. It's not like something from another planet or anything totally different. And those people got the attention for the last 70 years. And so
Hmm.
I think it's very good that they're not the only ones getting that attention anymore.
Yeah, people like Nerdy. He's somebody that stands out to me. I love what he's doing,
Oh yeah,
and
he's just so fun and energy and just like a great person. I haven't met him personally, but I have a lot of friends who go to his shows regularly or have booked events with him, and I've heard nothing but just such positive energy, which is what we're all about that too, and really appreciate artists that are, I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but don't take themselves too seriously. Like I don't get the
yeah,
vibe that he thinks he's better than anybody. He is
no.
an incredible artist, but he's like very welcoming and opening type of artist.
Yeah, and that's helpful in an environment, especially when you're on tour and you're doing shows anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country. It's good when there's just a good vibe among everybody and it's chill and it's a good time. What do you think it takes to create a good show and keep a good environment going?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of aspects to that, and more that we try to elevate for ourselves. Like I think first and foremost for us, like we're all just music nerds and guitar nerds and equipment guys. So it's like, okay, like you spend all your time as a kid and a teenager and growing up, like just getting the technical aspect down. Like how do you just even make three guitar amps and a bass drum and all these vocals sound okay together, and like make
Mhm.
hone that in and just make sure that the foundation of sound is appealing and coming across the way you want it to. But then that's really just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, everything from how are you coordinating or art directing what it looks like on stage, or how are you interacting with the audience or not. Like certain musics, maybe it's better to have a different type of vibe than that. Like maybe it's a little less like, hey, I'm just one of you guys in the crowd, and it's more of like an elevated artist, and it's something totally separate. And I think it's really interesting depending on the type of music and the type of folks that you want to connect with. Like there's so many different ways to go about that, and there's a lot of bands doing a lot of and artists doing a lot of really cool things that I always think about that when I'm watching an artist who's like super huge, like Metallica. Like, at what point do you decide, okay, we're gonna start putting shit on fire? And then
Yeah.
at what point do you decide, okay, we're gonna have the stage moving like this? Like, and then someone on a really small scale production, like artists on our level that are starting to do crazy things, that it's like, oh, how are you pulling that off? And how much time and effort and planning is going into these things? And you don't have a whole road crew and millions of dollars to make it happen, but you're still doing something interesting. It's like just being creative and trying to give the best experience to your audience. I think there's just so many facets to that that are really fascinating.
Totally. And when you finish your set on stage, what is it that has you walking away going, that was a good night or that was a good set?
I think there's two things. There's like the internal, which is like, how do we feel about our own performance and what we heard on the stage? And that always sounds just, I mean, dynamically and physically, that's what our sound on stage is not the same sound you're hearing out in the audience. So it can be
Yeah.
hard to tell sometimes, like, oh, I couldn't really hear the vocals at all. But then the audience is like, oh, they sounded great and they were really hot in the mix and blah, blah, blah. So I think one aspect is, what did we hear and feel happen to us on stage? And was that positive or negative? But then I think more importantly, what was the energy and the feedback we were receiving from the audience and how they were reacting to things? Or did we start to play a slow song and everyone went to go get a drink at the bar and left the floor for a little bit? Or did we play a really high energy song and people started to get really into it? And I think seeing the response that you get and feeling the response is probably the biggest indicator of whether it's successful or not. Because in the end, you're really there for the people. They can just go on the
Yeah.
internet and listen to the streaming version of it, but to go to the show, it's about providing them an experience.
Yeah. So is there a focus for 13 Arrows on interacting with the crowd at all?
A little bit. So we kind of have a couple different dynamics to that. Like, I think our bass player Harry is kind of the ringleader of crowd interaction
He's the
because
ham. Okay.
yeah, he's the ham. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like he's a everybody in the band is a really big fan of comedy and different stand-up comedians, and I think Harry has a lot going on in that world and being comfortable interacting with people. And he is a bass player. It's like he's never retuning the bass or putting a capo on it or changing out pedals or this and that. Like he has a pretty reliable setup that he doesn't have to fuss
Okay.
with things. And I'm fussing with a lot of things and also
Yeah.
singing. And so when I'm not singing in between songs, it's like, okay, I got to get a drink real quick or I got to tune this up real quick. And I try to interact as much as I can, but it's definitely like a shared group dynamic because okay, between this next song, he's got to switch his guitar, so Eddie can't talk. So someone else, we don't want to just have radio silence, and we don't want to
Yeah.
ignore the crowd, and we don't want to feel like we're just playing to ourselves and not being like a two-way street with a dialogue with the audience. So I think that's another big part of coordinating is just getting comfortable and designing your sets to know what's coming next, but also leaving some spontaneity in there. If it's like, oh, like everyone's getting really pumped up and we were planning to play a slow song next, but let's call an audible. We want to do something that seems to fit the energy they're asking for at the moment.
Yeah. Just go with the flow, see what
Yeah,
happens, match the energy, and then you don't lose them.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Got it.
Yeah.
What got you interested in music to begin with?
Well, my father is a guitar player as well, and so there was always guitars around the house growing up. But the real catalyst, I think, was, I mean, he always like wanted me to play or get into it or check this
Hmm.
out, and I didn't actually take it serious though until my best friend got a guitar in like sixth grade, and so then he had a guitar, and it was like, oh, now there's like one of my peers that I can do this with, and it was no question. Like the second we started trying to learn, it was we're a band now. It wasn't like, oh, I
Yeah.
just want to play guitar in my room. It was like, we're going to be a band and we're going to play in front of people and we're going to make music. Like it's never really been anything else to me other than that. And
Hmm.
so I think since I was probably like 11, I've been in some sort of band of some kind. And that was really, I think, the big catalyst for it. But yeah, very musical family. And the same goes for the other guys. Like Eddie and Johnny, their dad is a musician as well. They play in his band aside from our own band as well. So I think just growing up with music and uh, yeah, I mean, it was kind of the first thing that was like, oh, this is something I just have to do. Like I couldn't just not do this and feel like fulfilled with life. Like even if
Yeah.
nothing comes of it, like if I was sitting in my basement all alone, I'm still just going to be writing songs till the end of my days.
Yeah. I think you're making a lot of people jealous right now because it doesn't sound like any of you had parents that were like, turn it down, don't practice there. Like
No,
you had
no. Yeah, we were
supportive
very
parents.
lucky. Yeah, we did. We're all very fortunate and very lucky about that. Like my house was the house that our band practiced in most of like high school and middle school and growing up and stuff like that. And families always come out to the shows and really supported us. And I mean, like when I got married at my wedding, the band played at the wedding and my dad got up and played some songs with us. The same thing happened at the
Oh,
other
cool.
guys. Like it's a very family oriented thing and we're all the best of buds. So it's yeah, it's pretty special. So very lucky in that sense.
Yeah, that's a solid foundation. And I did listen to the clips from On the Outside too. It's out now,
Hmm.
your last
Yes.
album. Tell me about the process of making the album.
Yeah, so that was a interesting, special, almost experiment, I would say, that I think a lot of artists went through when COVID happened. So
Mm,
prior to COVID, we were working a lot with a local studio in Northeast Minneapolis called the Pearl Recording Studio. So we would demo stuff on our own, and then we would go in there and work with our friend Zach, who we loved working with. Excuse me, he's a producer and engineer and owns the studio, and
mhm.
we kind of got used to that process and we would do more smaller chunks like okay, let's record just 3 4 5 songs at a time, release music more often. People are just streaming, listening to singles, not always engaging with albums as much anymore. So it was like let's just keep giving people a reason to talk about us or a reason to listen to something new.
Yeah.
But then when COVID hit, it was like all right, we can't go to a studio or be around anybody. And so for the first couple months, we're all totally isolated. And then it got to a point where it was like, okay, my little bubble is going to be my immediate family and the band. So those were the only
Hmm.
people we were around for months and months. And we're very fortunate again that Eddie, he went to school for musical engineering and he has a home studio set up that we would use to demo stuff. And we're like, all right, we're going to do a full on album on our own, recording it ourselves in Eddie's basement because that's the only option right now. We can't play shows, we can't work with someone else
Yeah.
without taking potential risks. So that was kind of the catalyst was like, all right, let's make use of the time when this is really the only option for us to do. And let's do a full album. Let's try to do it ourselves and see how well we can do it. And it was a fun process and we got to take our time and didn't have to worry about paying for
Yeah.
studio time. So we could play around a little bit. We weren't quite under the gun so much. But that was really the catalyst for, I think, why we wanted to do a full album and the way that we approached accomplishing that.
Yeah. Is there any song or any element of On the Outside that you're particularly proud of?
Uh, yeah, that's a good question. I think just the most proud element is probably just that we did everything ourselves. We brought in
Yeah.
our friend, we brought in one friend, our buddy Dave Mailing. He is his own solo artist and also plays in like a million different bands. And he works and plays with Galen Lee, and he's like way above our level of musicianship and where he's at in his career. So feel very grateful that he's willing to come slum it up with us in the basement and contribute. So we basically recorded everything, and a lot of the times when we get to the okay, everything is said and done, let's bring in Dave and see if we want to add organ or piano or a synthesizer to anything. So he did help us with that, and then we did outsource for the mixing and mastering, but all the recording and production was just our own do it yourself kind of thing, which was fun.
Cool. I love that. And then it's almost more true to you guys and authentic to your sound. It's your baby. Like you had your hands in everything.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yep. So
what's
we're
next?
Oh, sorry. I was maybe actually just about to answer your next question. I think we're going to record again back in the studio in May. This time we're trying a new place we haven't been to, but an old friend, a guy named Tony, who owns Minnehaha Recording Company in South Minneapolis. And so we've had some friends record there, and we've known Tony for a long time. So we're excited to work with him. And I think we're going to kind of go back to our methodology from before, where it's like, all right, we're just going to do 3, 4, or 5 songs with however many we can do over the course of a couple days, and work with the studio again. And excited to hear, how's is it going to feel or sound very different from going back to that versus doing it our own. So
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, what's
yeah,
coming next? What can we look forward to? Ta-da! We answered it. That's a mic
yeah,
drop. We have some
yeah,
new stuff to look forward to, and that's the best answer you could
yeah,
have given.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, we're really excited, and so we're in the kind of final stages right now of a lot of the times when we're building up to recording. It's like, all right, we have this. We use a Google Drive, and so everyone
Mm,
submits demos of, oh, here's just a little guitar part, or here's a whole song, or here's what could potentially be a chorus, and there'll be like 100 of these little things on the Google Drive, and then everybody listens to it and writes down, okay, these 10 things stood out to me, and then we compare notes, and it's like, oh, all 5 of us were attracted to these ones, so let's focus working on those. And we're kind of at the stage right now where there's maybe 10 of those that are full songs now that we want to just whittle down to, like, okay, what are like the 4 or 5 that we actually want to share with the world and put out there. So that's kind of my favorite part, I think, is just working through the ideation and the creation of a song, and then going through the recording process and hearing, this was in our head and now it's real in the world and we can share it. So very excited about that coming up.
yeah, and it's not easy to choose and go through that stuff. I remember one time
Yeah.
I was talking with Michael Romeo from Symphony X, and he said that on
Okay.
his computer he had like 80,000 riffs, just riffs. That's all it
Yeah.
was. Just riffs, just stored,
Yeah.
ready to go, just ideas from him, just messing around in his own home studio that
Yeah.
he would bring to the band. And I'm like, how in the hell do you go through 80,000 files of
Yeah.
like, so, but you figure it out. You just pick the best, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. It's a tough process sometimes, and it can be a challenge as well, because it's like, I we don't ever want to hold anything back from sharing with one another, but sometimes it's like I'll come up with an idea and be like, oh, is this really even something that would work as a 13 arrows thing? And
Mm,
then a lot of the times though, you share that with the other guys and they go, oh, that's cool what you did there, but like, have you thought about it like this? And then once it starts
mm.
going through all the filters of all 4 guys in the band, it always comes out 13 arrows on the other end. Whether we like it or not, it's going to be us.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like no holds barred, like don't hold anything back and just share everything. And it can take some time to filter through all that, but um, there's definitely been surprises where it's like, oh, I don't like this, or this isn't going to be good. But
Yeah.
then once it gets through everybody and it starts to become a song, it's like, oh my God, I didn't think this was going to be cool. And this is like the best thing we've done.
It's weird how that works out sometimes. Well, I
Yeah.
am definitely looking forward to everything new coming our way from 13 Arrows. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Mike. Thanks for getting us stoked
Yeah.
about it all.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you and inviting us and helping promote some of the stuff we're doing. So let us know if we can ever come back or if there's anything we can do for you. And we really
Yeah.
appreciate it.